Hello. There is a control on the air. As part of the heading behind the scenes of Magical Secrets, we have Valentin as a guest. Valentin, please introduce yourself to our people. Good afternoon. My name is Valentin, my surname is Roganov, I am a yamak and a hypnotherapist. I was engaged in voodoo magic. I was really in Haiti, and I can tell you something about real voodoo, not online, but about the kind it is really practiced on the mountainous island of Haiti. Tell me please, did you find magic? Magic found you. How did you choose this path? Already, probably in the 9th grade, I was engaged in such a direction of wrestling as chorus wrestling, but it is not very well known. It is connected not so much with martial art as with meditation, with a meditative movement. Here, I studied with a coach, a friend of my father. And it so happened that there were adults in the group, that is, there were 40 years old, and I was a 9th grader, who practiced with them. And they all had such an esoteric bias, read various esoteric literature, and began to offer to read to me. There were such authors as Rad Ginny Shosha, Carlos Castaneda, Gurdjieff. And that's how it all started. In the 9th grade, let's say, instead of War and Peace, I managed to master only the first volume. And then I started reading literature of such an esoteric nature, and it became interesting to me. And I kind of caught myself that this is what I'm really interested in. And everything else there is like there are ordinary school sciences, it was a little boring for me. And I read directly from Gurdjieff that he reacted very positively to such a system as yoga. He wrote there in one of his books that here is a yoga system, it seems to be very worthy and very effective. Here. And at the institute, when I entered, I just went to yoga, began to practice yoga. And not only by asanas, but by reciting mantras, meditations, and so on. And I also had small spinal problems since childhood. I decided to heal them through yoga again, and found another specialist in Pushkin. A Reiki master who, well, healed by laying on hands. And when I came to him for the first appointment, I asked the first question. Can I learn, well, so that not only I go to you, so that I can do something myself? And he says, you just came on time, we have an initiation into the first stage of Reiki next week, it was free back then. And I started doing Reiki. Accordingly, within 5 years of the institute, I became a Reiki master, completed 3 stages. And after the institute, I initially worked in law enforcement, and I had a short break. That is, I practiced Reiki for myself, but since there was a lot of work, let's just say I was a little busy. I worked in the transport police as an operative, and worked a little as an investigator of the prosecutor's office. But after a while, the craving for magic as occult knowledge began to dominate. I resigned from the authorities, and have already started, let's say, to practice professionally, to accept people in some way. Then it was still not mass, I took it only through friends. I didn't have a website then, no advertising, nothing. That's how it all started. And then in the 2010th year, I met my teacher, who had been to Africa several times, he had not been to Haiti at that time. And we began to practice voodoo with him, it so happened. So, when we started doing voodoo, I already made a website, and this website is basically still alive. I made it in the 2013th year of the site, it still works for me, in principle in its original form. I haven't even changed anything in it since then. And directly in the 2019 year, I went to Haiti together with my teacher. I have already received all the initiations, they're directly in the homeland of the cult, although it turns out that before the trip, I practiced it for 9 years, while directly in Russia. In other words, I already had a high level of training. And of course, since I have not been doing anything but magic for a long time, I have also been doing Russian witchcraft, in addition to Udu. Over the past 5 years, he has been actively studying hypnosis and nonverbal suggestions. That is, I first started with classical hypnosis, then quickly realized that this thing is not very effective. He began to study various forms of suggestion. Here. And I want to say that, in fact, now I already have my own author's method, which includes elements of witchcraft, includes elements of hypnosis, includes elements of Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. There are also practical techniques for achieving results in fact, and very effective. That is, I am also a member of the Zakshan community, practicing Zakshan, here. And today it is my method, it is like this, well, it includes different aspects, but thanks to it, I was able to come to greater effectiveness, because I drew attention to the fact that if you only do witchcraft, only voodoo rituals there, Russian witchcraft is not so important, then the effectiveness is lower than if. In addition to, let's say, rituals, we also use hypnosis, work out the subconscious of a person. Because it is clear that if a client comes with problems, well, not always the problems are connected precisely with the fact that there is damage or a curse on him, or something like that. Often people may have certain complexes, fears, some problems from childhood. That is, you need to work out the human psyche, right? But not as a psychologist, because as a psychologist it is also possible, but it is very long. Yes, this is general information. Yes, that you need to go to a good psychologist for 5 years to get a stable result. We live in a world where time is short, and 5 years, well, there is simply no way to walk. Therefore, many other techniques related to hypnosis, with nonverbal suggestions, are being used now. They allow you to achieve a psychological effect much faster. Well, let's say they're 4 or 5 sessions. 3, 5, 7, well, depending on the severity of the case, like this.
Let's go back then. Well, probably start maybe from the beginning. That is, there is African voodoo, there is Haitian, somewhere it is written that this is a religion. In other words, it's such a crazy mix. Therefore, here you are probably as experts in this field. We ask some to give such a brief digression into history, and tell us some basic concepts and differences maybe in the Odu tradition.
I'll tell you without any problems, because I was also engaged in African voodoo. I just went to Haiti later, and not to Africa. But this was due to the fact that Haitian, from my point of view, is more effective. But not only from my point of view, from the point of view of my teacher, with whom we traveled together. And also a number of other people. But I will tell you all about it in more detail. Look, first of all, if we are talking about the word itself in Odu, yes. Then this is just the tip of the iceberg of African beliefs. The religion itself is in Odu. It originated in Africa, in the kingdom of Dahomey. That, well, was a long time ago. In fact, no one knows when the voodoo religion originated, let's face it. Well, maybe it was 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. In other words, we don't have any written sources, so, well, with the exception of some stories, but that's not quite it. There are only 2 countries in the world where Odu is the state religion. These countries are Haiti and Benin. But in general, in Africa, every country has its own national religion, which, well, let's say, can be similar to voodoo, yes. That is, their local paganism. Voodoo is directly the direction of Beninese. And if we talk about Haitian voodoo, then it is fundamentally very different from the Belinsky direction. And from the African one in general. Because voodoo appeared in Haiti, let's say, along with slaves, when it was imported there. And Haitian voodoo, it absorbed the direction and Christianity, since they were all forcibly baptized. Also absorbed the direction, of course, in the Uda of their roots, and also Indians lived there at one time, who were subsequently exterminated. But Haitian voodoo has also absorbed some aspects of the Indian religion, in particular, in Eva. Now, if you look in Africa, they rarely use Evi there, but in Haitian they constantly draw. So, in this is just an echo of the influence of the American Indians, because they have always painted the web in general. And again, if we talk about efficiency, yes, why did I go to Haiti? Decided to do Haitian voodoo. Although Africa seems to be closer and actually safer. Because Benin is a country, well, not to say that it is successful, but it is safe at least. Haiti is a very dangerous side. Here, but again, because before I made the decision to go to the cult's homeland, I practiced at the Uda in Russia for about 9 years. And I could already compare, try something and conclude what works and what doesn't. Well, I realized the following, that we still, well, I personally and you too, live in a big city. African voodoo, it is largely tied to the countryside. That is, their people live in nature, they have an ocean, on the ocean they call, for example, Aida Veda or Mamiata. There are fields, there are forests, that is, and each, roughly speaking, natural phenomenon has its own voodoo. Well, for example, there is an ocean in Oolong, then Hosuata. There is, for example, a Wudden, which is associated with snakes. It's a Dunbola, yes, it's like the main snake, a boa constrictor. Here. Well, there is also a certain Wudden, which is associated with magical plants, and there are many, many, many different ones. But the question is, what if we do magic on the territory of St. Petersburg? Yes, we do.
How can this be modified in our circumstances?
That's what I'm talking about. That is, it turns out how. I quite clearly drew attention to the fact that what is connected, for example, with water manifestations, with the ocean, generally works poorly in St. Petersburg, because we have the Neva, but compare, let's say, the Atlantic Oceans with the Neva. So the power of the Wuddens work on the ocean, and on the Neva, will also differ. In other words, it's not serious. We have forests, but it's necessary to go out of town, it's inconvenient. That is, if you live in a city, and you will not constantly travel somewhere far away. Plus, again, there is such a nuance that there is no winter in Africa. But winter, it changes witchcraft very much in general. That is, let's say if we work well on the same Neva, then in winter the neva is covered with ice. And it is simply impossible to work on it. That is, there is a certain specificity that, as it were, well, not everything that works in Africa works with us. I can tell you this as a practice. So, by and large, the only place of power in St. Petersburg, and in general in any major city, yes, is a cemetery. Because there is a cemetery in all cities. And the most interesting thing is that there are a lot of cemeteries in cities, because there are a lot of people. Someone is constantly dying, and here is the energy of death, it seems to be in the air, let's say. And besides, in general, the aspect of death in the city is very pronounced, because we have cut down trees, asphalt everywhere. Stone houses. That is, nature itself, it is as if buried under asphalt, under concrete. And the aspect of death, even in living nature, it is also present. Therefore, I can definitely say that the strongest direction that we can practice in the city, if we are talking about magic, is the cemetery direction. For 10 years of experience and direct witchcraft, I can tell you for sure, I have tried different directions and others. The cemetery definitely covers everything. Moreover, it is universal, you can make money through the cemetery, finances are going very well. Sexual attractiveness is going very well, for example, if a woman cannot get married or something like that, fine. Well, and all sorts of love spells, lapels, dissections, spoilage, well, everything. This is a completely universal tool, we can do everything on it. This is more effective on the territory of the city than anything else. That's why, in fact, I went to Haiti, because the cemetery direction in Benin, in particular, is not very well developed. They work there, let's say, with Kuvita or Igan, but it's not really a cemetery, it's the ancestors. That is, through this spirit, they establish contact with their ancestors. And in the cemetery, if we work through Baron Samedi, through the Haitian direction, there. As if the ancestors do not particularly figure, we work through the dead, and through the State Duma.
Can you tell us a little more about this defense of Samedi, so that the audience is also aware?
I'll tell you. Let's start in general.
Concept.
In general, yes, with Haitian voodoo, well, and we started with the fact that it is very different from African, almost in general. Well, it differs first of all, in that even there is not this fa. Here is the fact that the base in Africa is an oracle of Ifa, through which it receives all the answers, whether a person can practice magic, what his spirits are, and so on. All through the fa. In Haiti, the fa does not exist at all. And if we talk about diagnostics, they do it on ordinary playing cards, not on tarot, just playing cards. That's further, if we're talking about defenses, and in general, about what kind of spirits there are in Haiti. There are two kinds of spirits as such in Haiti. There are lower spirits, so-called, which are known, they are written about everywhere on the internet. And there is a second kind of spirits, these are devils. They are no longer written about on the internet, because they exist only in the so-called Rita Makaya, that is, the voodoo direction, which is called Makaya, to which I belong. Here I have beads, these are exactly Makaya beads, the colors of Makaya. Here. There is also a separate kind of spirits called devils. Here the Baron himself is Lua, and the devil is, accordingly, devils. How they differ, I'll tell you now. It is believed that the spirits of Lua, they have no connection with people at all, and they exist regardless of people. Here is Baron Samedi, this is the owner of the cemetery in Russian. It's not Russian to say that, in principle, this is death. That is, it is directly death. Since we live in a dual world, everything has a masculine, feminine beginning. That's why we have Baron Sambadi and Maman Bridget in Haiti. In Russia, they call the owner of the cemetery, the mistress of the cemetery, yes, that is, it is directly Loa. What does Loa mean? That is, his existence itself is not connected with people, because even if people all disappear, there will be animals, trees. They will also die, and death will still remain regardless of the presence of people. And this also includes all other spirits like Shango, Marasa and so on, which are associated with natural phenomena, that is, thunder, they say, the ocean, they exist independently of people. And devils are specialized spirits that people themselves have created for certain purposes. That is why I say that Haitian voodoo includes aspects of the magic of the ancient Indians. Here are the Indians, they had a technique for creating a mummy. That is, they took, let's say, a living child, sacrificed him in a certain way, and then his body was mummified. And the spirit was instilled there. And, by the way, there is also a similar technique in bondage, but it is closed. But I just talked to some Kabbalists, they told me that we also have a technique when a demon is instilled into the corpse of a child. Namely a child. There is such a thing. So, these devils, this kind of spirits, are spirits, it is the universes, roughly speaking, in the corpse of a child, which, and, accordingly, they are created by the sorcerer himself, by man himself. Therefore, when I was in Haiti, I naturally received first of all Baron Samedi, as the most supreme power. That is responsible for the cemetery. I played the wedding of Bridget's self-deception. This is an additional initiation that gives certain powers, but also imposes certain responsibilities. Here. I also received naturally Baron Carifa, Baron Criminal, well, that is, everything related to the cemetery. I received firm and two, I am an expert in this. And I got, of course, one devil, because, well, to visit Haiti and bring the devil, it would also not be quite right. I got the devil, well, his open name is the name Zom, which you can say, yes, it's not forbidden on the TV camera. He is considered the president of the Haitian devils, and his expressed function is as if he gives money and enrichment. If we add in a nutshell about Haitian voodoo. In general, it should be understood that in Udu, yes, it is a religion. In other words, in Benin it was a religion, and in Guinita, when they moved, it's still their religion. But as in any country, and in any system, there is religion, and there is witchcraft. And as there is orthodoxy in Russia, but there is a black book, or black paganism. Also in African witchcraft there is, let's say, voodoo, there is as. And in Haiti there is the same direction, yes, that is, which is not religious voodoo, but witchcraft. And this direction is called voodoo Maka. This is what I went to Haiti for, and what I got there. What is the difference between voodoo Maka, the traditional voodoo religion? But it differs primarily in its practical orientation. In the voodoo religion, both in Haitian and African, in fact, there is a lot of attention paid to dancing, people dance a lot there. Sing national songs, drink there. In other words, this is such a well-religious ceremony. It somewhat resembles our church ceremonies, but in a more wild form, and there they also use alcohol. Well, as in fact, in the church, it contains alcohol in communion, and there it is used simply by drinking from a bottle. That is, in this way. Here in Makaya, it is a practical direction. That is, there, first of all, much fewer people participate in poppy rituals, because not everyone has access. To participate in the poppy ritual, you need to have these beads, to get them, you need to have an initiation. That is, there are rituals involved, well, maybe 5 people, maybe 10. In other words, there are no such voodoo processions, as in Africa, there are 200, 1,000 people such.
Anyone can go get this initiation. And is it necessary to have something? That is, there's a gift, a talent. It's something that comes from above. That is, here, there you go. In general, this is the side of the question.
Naturally. Well, first of all, if I had been practicing in Uda for 9 years in Russia before the trip, that is, I already had experience. The spirits led me, and if the spirits hadn't led me, I wouldn't even have gone there. Because even crossing the border there is a huge difficulty. There can be robbed right on the border, but this is a separate story, that is, it is natural. But in fact, it seems to me that if a person does not need it, it will not even occur to him. Here you have listed this mass and weddings, and that, and that. It was you who tried to absorb as much as possible into yourself, or is this the necessary kit, and the minimum necessary? In order to get some kind of power. No, it's not the minimum. This is the maximum, on the contrary. A wedding with a spirit is very serious, no. I received the minimum, even before my trip to Haiti, working in Russia. I went there just to get everything to the eyeballs, yes, that is, I wanted to do it. This is the maximum. That is, in order to get as close to the cemetery as possible, if this woman, she is getting married with Baron Sambo. If a man, then with Baron Sambotis' wife, Maman Bridget. This is quite a serious rite, it is long, it is played well, not for one day, it is long enough. It is made both in the cemetery and at home, that is, they're in different places. We do some of it during the day, some of it at night. It's quite well, such a heavy rite here, but it gives more authority. That is, I, having played a wedding with Maman Bridget, with the owner of the cemetery, I can come to the cemetery. And she will help me more actively, as if as her husband. But only if I observe my duties as a husband. But I can't tell you what is included in my duties, because it is already a secret. But there are certain restrictions on behavior, on life, which are imposed after the wedding, and they must be observed for life. If you don't comply with them, well, then there may be certain problems, because she will get angry in this way, here.
Well, it's probably impossible to get a divorce here, right?
To be honest, I didn't ask this question, because I have no such plans, for me magic is my life. That's the question I didn't even ask.
A question from a woman.
No, and I think it's impossible. There are some moments when a spouse comes, some require you to make an unplanned sacrifice or something like that. In general, I feel the following to you, that if we are talking about a wedding with a spirit, then the wedding and the relationship with the spirit, with whom this wedding is played, it to some extent resembles a human one. If I begin to communicate divination with my wife, with the spirit, then the character manifests itself. And Maman Bridget is quite quarrelsome, that is, of all the Haitian female spirits, she is the most evil and irreconcilable. That is, it manifests itself. That is there. But up to the point that sometimes spirits can check. That is, they, for example, well, if you've had a wedding with a spirit, she can take and demand some huge sacrifice. Just to test you. And in some cases, you have to pull her back, put her in her place, and in the next divination, she will answer that yes. It was right, that is, I was just checking you. In other words, a relationship with a spirit is like a relationship with a real wife. That is, there may be some checks, jokes, but if you pass them with dignity, then everything will be smooth. And how does this communication happen? Is it only in rituals, in everyday life? No, no, no. Apply. No, 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 in rituals. This is done through a ritual. You enter into a trance, communication through shells, through direct vision, yes, that is. It happens exactly in the ritual. It's not done spontaneously, it's not done every day. In other words, communication with the spirit is necessary to prepare for it, there is a certain post there. Naturally, we exclude alcohol, but I don't drink it anyway. But if someone drinks, they don't drink there for a day or two. In other words, it is necessary to bring yourself to this state, and to get answers. Because hypothetically, of course, it is possible to fall into a trance there right now, and get some answers. But we are interested in quality in order to get really something that is reality, yes, and not our fiction. Therefore, it is necessary to prepare seriously for divination. It's not one day, and it's, well, they don't do it on empty. That is, I, for example, communicate well, not more than once a month. That is, I accumulate questions for a month, and then once a month I ask. That's it. It happens that they refuse to help you, and say that we will not help here, and somehow it is justified. Anything happens, yes. That is, it can be done. Well, I do divination, for example, to take me or not to take this client, let's say, purely for me. And, let's say, the answer comes to me, that it is better not to take this client. Then I don't take this client. For what reasons the answer came, it is difficult to say. Maybe the client is not quite adequate, or maybe it will end badly for me. Everything happens in life, but I look through it, but I look mainly at the subject of even myself. Here it is worth taking this client personally to me, or it is not worth it. That's the kind of communication. What kind of force are you working with? I always turn to one power. This is, well, the owner-mistress of the cemetery. That is, in Haitian voodoo, this is the defense of the demon Bridget. There is also a separate guide. These are certain spirits of the dead, which differ from ordinary dead, yes. There is, for example, a separate baron criminal. This is a separate entity in the cemetery, but in any case we almost always turn to the same ones. These are Hosea, the owner of the cemetery, the baron himself, and demon Bridget. But in addition to the duties that were imposed on you during the initiation, are there any fees or requirements or something for each repertoire that you conduct and address them already? Look, since I have the highest degree of initiation, yes, I can pay with spirits, blood, either my own blood or the client's blood. I'm not talking about the blood of sacrificial animals now, because sacrificial animals can be brought by people already from the second level of initiation. The very first level is considered still animals cannot be sacrificed, from the second level. It is already possible to sacrifice animals. At the highest level, at the level of the emperor, the Makai Voodoo emperor, there is a separate permission to work with his own blood. And with the client's blood. Why can't this be done at lower levels? Because it is believed that if done incorrectly, then through the client's blood, and through their personal blood, the spirits can eat a person completely. But if you do it professionally, then the sacrifice of your blood will be more effective than the sacrifice of animals. Because when you donate blood from yourself, it's kind of stronger. But here you need to know the nuances of exactly how to do it. That's what I got in the traffic police. I studied for a long time. There are a lot of subtleties. Because through this thing, you can get more powerful performance, but through the same thing, you can get very strong problems if you do it wrong. But I know how to do it right, because I've been working with my own blood, and the client's blood for how long? Probably since the 19th year. I don't sacrifice any animals. Here. And in principle, he is alive and well, and the customers are happy. When did this meeting or contact with these spirits take place, which you realized that they were leading you? It happened, I don't remember exactly, probably in the 2016 year. Because initially we were engaged in the bean direction in Oud, and then my friend went to Haiti for the first time without me. And brought Baron Samani and Maman Bridget, and Baron Criminal right away. So, when I started working with them, I just felt that, well, this is mine. In other words, the African direction has also remained, I feel good about it, but the Haitian one is like a cemetery. It began to give just great results. What are the big results? Well, completely mundane, that is, there was more money, orders began to work better, the sorting began to work better. The spell began to work, yes, because again, I will say bluntly, no matter what the internet witches and sorcerers say. The spell does not work at all for anyone. If someone from the audience turned to the sorcerers, they probably noticed that it didn't work. Here, through the cemetery direction, the spell finally began to work. It's just nonsense, because, to be honest, this spell doesn't work for anyone, no matter what they say. Well, I'm serious about this. In other words, it turns out that the result that you started to receive from the rituals that you performed became that yardstick. And you realized that this is yours. This is mine, of course. Because, but always, I'm not some kind of schizoteric who is just engaged in spiritual searches, abstract theoretical ones. I am a practitioner. I earn money by accepting people. People come to me with the question of getting their husband back, getting their wife back, removing the damage, removing the curse, removing fears, rituals for a fart, for attractiveness, and so on. In other words, my income directly depends on the results of witchcraft. Why am I, let's just say, investing money in these myself? Because a trip to Haiti is, well, $10,000, if we talk about the price, yes, that is, it's a lot of money. Quite a lot. But for me, this is my bread, that is, I invest in myself, this is my professional development. I do not know how someone is going there, he is studying at Harvard, I am going to study in Haiti. That is in this way.
Does it happen that you refuse?
Of course. First of all, I don't take people with mental disabilities. In fact, well, one priest even told me about it at the time. He says, Valentin, you know, there are a lot of crazy people going to church. Here, so I'll say that there are probably even more crazy people going to sorcerers than to church. Since I have psychology and hypnosis in addition to magic, of course, I will feel a crazy person. I don't take crazy people. Why? Because, well, it's either impossible to help a person, or very difficult, yes. I try not to take people with schizophrenia, at least in the active phase, because, well, even doctors can't help them. And in principle no one. You can be careful, or you can always excuse yourself, this is the traditional excuse of a sorcerer. But it also happens when communicating with women, and in general, that the spirits do not order, that's like they demand something. Just like I did a divination here, the spirits forbade me. That's it. That is, neatly, beautifully came out of the situation. Again, after talking to a person, you just feel his insides. If a person is to some extent extremely selfish, evil, but again it is felt, I always feel it. I also try not to take such people, simply because there is such a thing as karma. If a person is extremely negative, then the problems that he has, they are connected again not with magic, and maybe not even with psychology, but simply with the fact that the consequences of his own actions return to him, yes. And to remove some karmic moments, but it is possible, but it is again very, very difficult. I prefer to deal with adequate people who have real problems. What are real problems? Here comes a man, but he is not crazy, not a schizoteric, an absolutely normal person, but there is an objective problem. His wife left, business collapsed, health flew. And so we start working with these objective problems and get the result. Naturally, again with regard to deadlines, I want to tell you right away that on the internet there is an announcement of the result in 3 days, the result in 7 days. But this is complete nonsense if we are talking about returning a person, really, to get a result. But I have had cases in my entire career, 3 or 4 times really in a day, 2 or 3 they returned. But it's just a unit. Basically, it's still 2 or 3 months of work, in some cases even more. These are the real deadlines to return a person. Everything they promise to do in a week, but it's just a hoax. It's just a hoax. But I want to say that people themselves actually lead to this deception, because when a client calls, he asks how long it will take. I say, well, 2 or 3 months. No, I'm not satisfied, I don't need a week. I say, well, okay, there are a lot of people on the internet offering, but you will just be deceived. And there have been cases many times, then they called me back. Valentin, yes, we paid the money, waited 7 days. Then they told us to wait 21 days, and in general we call you, the money is given, there is no result. Therefore, with regard to the love spell again, with regard to the return of a person to the family, You need to understand how much it is necessary at all. If it's not necessary, it's better not to even do it, because it's hard work. But if it is really necessary, and there is no way without it, because there are, for example, abandoned children, or some moments that need to be solved somehow, then there is no need to hurry. You can wait 2 or 3 months for your fate. Why not? You can wait 4 months. But if the person returns after that, then I think it's not a problem, you just need to wait.
Please tell us about the mechanism of the spell.
And how does the spell work? Yes. Good question, I'll tell you in detail. So, well, first of all, you should understand the following, that magic, it can actually strengthen or weaken what we already have. Magic, well, can't do what can't be. Therefore, which love spells are easier to make. It is much easier to return a husband or wife to the family. If there is a family, if there are children, if a person has gone to his mistress, to quarrel with his mistress and bring him back, is a fairly simple job. Why? Because people have been married, lived for many years, have children, there must have been some feelings, because, well, few people get married without having any feelings at all. That is, the connection was originally between people, and it remains. And we simply strengthen this connection with the help of magic, and the person returns. It is much more difficult to make a love spell if people are not married, if they are not even in some cases, there was no sex, yes. That is, people turned to me, said that I like such and such a girl. I say, did you at least have something? No, it wasn't. But if there was nothing, it is very difficult to perform such a spell, because there was no sex. So there is no connection either energetically or physically. So what are we going to strengthen with magic? There's nothing special to strengthen here. Therefore, magic works in a love spell, in particular, in such a way that it enhances what is. If people had any feelings, yes, let them fade away. Let there be negativity, some mutual resentments, infidelities. That's what you can work with. We work, let's say, through nonverbal suggestion. We remove some negative memories from a person's thoughts. Because people, let's say, have lived a life together. There was good, there was bad, well, like everyone else. But for some reason, when parting, everyone remembers only the bad. That's what's good, it was, but they don't seem to see it, they don't remember it. And they remember the bad down to the smallest detail. That's what we do with magic. We sort of clean out his head. But there's magic, hypnosis, yes, I have it by the cumulative method anyway. We remove negative memories, but on the contrary, what is associated with the positive, we highlight. That is, so that a person, as it were, could see more clearly what was good. And in this way, people are more likely to converge back in most cases. Here. And if people have nothing, yes, to highlight, there was no positive, because there was no relationship at all. That's just the guy liked the girl there, yes, or vice versa, and they had nothing, she immediately turned him down. But here he wants her. Of course, it's probably possible to do this, but it's very hard work. That is, it's just so difficult. And heavy in what way? What will require some additional sacrifices? Volume. Energy consumption. Energy consumption is work through nonverbal suggestion, work through rituals, one ritual, the second, the third. In other words, this is exactly the volume, a large amount of work. And, accordingly, the price, yes, because the more you work, this time must be paid, this is also understandable.
What eventually happens to the person to whom this spell is directed?
Look, well, maybe there are different techniques, yes, there are techniques of a zombie spell itself, yes. But there are techniques, roughly speaking, of returning a husband or wife. If we are working on the return of a husband or wife, we just really remove the negative, highlight the positive. And this is usually enough for a person to return, because there are common children, there is a house, that is. There are even certain social moments that pull him back. Something changes inside him. He begins to treat his wife in a new way, as he treated at the beginning of the marriage, that is. We renewed our feelings, and now he returns. And if people were not married and initially experienced only negativity towards each other, there is nothing to cling to at all. Then this is where the suppression of the will is already done. But again, I will tell you this. Everything that is connected with a rigid suppression of the will, it may not even work corny. Because here it will depend on who is affected. There are people who are more susceptible to hypnosis, there are those who do not succumb at all, yes. There are people who feel any evil eye, there was a bus ride, somewhere in the subway, a person was jinxed. There are people who have lived all their lives, they have never been stared at, yes, that is. It already depends on the strength of a person. If we work for a change, for the suggestion of a negative sense, then this is a struggle. That is, how strong a person is and how strong we are, and how much time we are ready to work. That is, it is clear, probably, it is possible to overcome any person, but it is a question of strength, means and resources, that is, how much it is needed. It turns out that justice is being violated. And it is violated. And here, there may already be certain rollbacks. That's why I say that I like to take fair orders to return my husband to the family, to return my wife, if there are children. They are left unfairly, everything needs to be fine. These are the orders I like to take. If a person on the contrary takes her husband away from the family, yes, this is considered a menial job. But I, for example, as a specialist, sometimes like to take such an order. Why? Because it's very complicated, and I'm just interested in, well, testing myself, yes, testing my strength. Working, well, from the point of view of skill, yes, as there are martial arts there, yes. That is, it's clear that it hurts someone, but it's still art. For me, yes, magic is an art, and black art, it also exists, yes. Therefore, of course, there are few such orders in practice, but sometimes they happen, and I sort of work with this too. And there is still a war of magicians, when, let's say, several magicians are fighting for one person. Therefore his wallet, there are for attention to a woman and so on. That is, one conditionally defends this man, from this woman, and from women. Yes, and there are those who want to get it. It's like this all the time. I'll tell you this, well, I probably won't open America. Rich men, they're worth their weight in gold. And women, attracting a rich man, very often turn to magicians. And, roughly speaking, the wife of an oligarch has her magicians, the mistress of an oligarch has her magicians. And the second mistress of an oligarch or the third has her magicians. I can't do it with an oligarch. And the oligarch probably has one too, yes.
It turns out just a battle of magicians, and they calmly relax on the beach, for example.
Well, yes, calmly until something works for some magician, and the rest is interrupted, for example, and the disease. You have such topics on your site as ricochets, rollback. Explain that there is no rebound for a rollback. What is it? Yes, this is an important question, because in fact, when you start doing real magic, and you are not just in some fantasies, you are doing real work, then sometimes you can face such a thing as a rollback. I used to experience them myself. The kickbacks were for health, that is, up to the point that I was doing a ritual of a spoiled property, and the next day, I suddenly had a sharp sore throat. And, well, for me, according to my body, my throat never hurts. That is, I can get the flu, sneeze there, get a fever, but my throat does not hurt. And immediately after the ritual, my throat suddenly ached, and it hurt for 3 weeks afterwards. That is, it's just something out of the ordinary, but it's clear that it was a rollback. But now, over time, I have already learned how to remove these kickbacks. And here, by the way, one of the ways is a wedding with a spirit. Because when I married a spirit, I received certain duties, but also certain rights. And then the spirit begins to protect. And since the cemetery is still the place where you can drain any amount of negativity, because the world of the dead is such a separate sphere, it can take in there endlessly, like a black hole to some extent. And therefore, any kickbacks can be thrown into the cemetery so that they do not exist. This applies both to me and to working with the client. This is the first part. And the second part, if you want to avoid kickbacks, try to work within the framework of justice. Because if you are attacked, and you defend yourself, hit back, there can be no kickbacks. If you attack yourself, without having any moral rights, in order to take it away, rob it, and so on, you use magic. This is clearly going beyond the limits of justice, and there is likely to be a rollback here. That is, just be fair, and there will be no kickbacks. Here is a universal rule.
I don't quite understand. You need to be fair to whom?
In relation to the order. If a person makes an order to punish someone, or to quarrel with someone, it should be fair. If, for example, a woman's husband was taken away, she has abandoned children, they have nothing to feed. Then she can order work to return, and punish the offender, at least to the extent that she falls behind, right? And if, for example, the situation is different, when a woman wants to take her husband away from a family where children are, so that children are abandoned, for example. She doesn't even love him, and she needs money, a rich man. There are such cases. This is called unfair work. And here, as a rule, there is a rollback, but there are certain nuances in working with the cemetery. Yes, why I love it. In this case, it is possible to take the rollback away from a person in a certain way so that it does not exist. It's possible. Here. Well, again, probably most magicians, yes, there are no kickbacks. But why doesn't it happen? Because the work is not being done either. That is, if you got to a charlatan, yes, on the one hand, you will not get a kickback, but you will not get a result. That is, Where the result is, there may be a reverse effect. Where there is no result, of course, there will be no rollback. In other words, this should also be understood.
And you see in advance the result in general, that it will turn out there, it will not work, or for you. It is also some kind of process that, but only in the end you already.
Yes, I'll tell you now. Look, first of all, no one sees the result in advance. Although again, most magicians claim that I now first make a diagnosis, and if I see that I can help, I take the money. And if I don't see it, I don't take it. But for some reason, they always take money, and we do not have a result in more than half of the cases. That is, it is, of course, a method of deception. The future is not fixed, it depends on our actions. Just imagine if Mac could really see the future. We have the Olympic Games, there is a sweepstake, there are sports betting. There is professional boxing there, where bets reach millions of dollars. If you can see the future, you can view, for example, the result of a boxing match. You place a bet, and now you don't need to accept any clients, you already live in France, on the Mediterranean coast. But for some reason, none of the sorcerers live there, and they all accept people at home, and take some pennies for the same diagnostics. And divination of the future. It is impossible to foresee the future. The future is not fixed at all. There is a space of options. I wrote about this in my book. There is a lot of literature about how we shape the future. But it is impossible to see the future. Therefore, neither I, nor any other sorcerer, nor voodoo, neither in Haiti, nor in Russia, nor in Africa, can see the result 100% in advance anywhere. Can we see what in advance? We can maybe, as you say, but see if a person needs it at all. But again, this is not magic. You can just talk to a person and understand whether he needs it or not. If, for example, in some cases the husband leaves or the wife leaves, it happens that these people do not suit each other at all. And there is no point in returning it simply because it is unnecessary and harmful. These things can be viewed, yes, what is called by the fate of a person, not by fate, it is worth returning, it is not worth it. But it is impossible to say 100% whether he will return or not after this particular ritual. I'm telling you that for sure. Just as it is impossible to know the result of a boxing match in advance, and the dollar exchange rate, and no one is doing this. The real thing is. But we have already talked a lot, and yet that's what magic is, that's how you would write it in simple accessible words. What is magic? Magic is the art of influencing and changing situations, and first of all, it is the art of influencing and changing oneself. That's what I would say. The methods can be different. It may be rituals, it may be techniques akin to hypnosis, it may be, I do not know, psychoanalysis, it does not matter. But this is just a way of first knowing yourself, then changing yourself, and subsequently learning about changes in the people around you and the world. That is, it is co-creation. It is believed that God is the creator. He created man in the image and likeness. He created. A person can also create. Magic is one of the types of creativity, just like painting, medicine, and music. Here is a way of self-realization, self-knowledge, and, well, a way of influencing the reality, of building your life as a person sees it. And the way of spiritual growth, undoubtedly, too, spiritual development. That's it.
What price does a person pay? The customer pays for his order with money. This is understandable. Does he pay anything else besides money?
Yes, there are 2 points here. First of all, what we have already discussed is a question of justice. If a person has strong problems, he is offended, deprived of business, he comes, he just looks for protection. The order is fair. Here the sorcerer appoints a financial fee, and these finances are the form of calculation. Because a human customer can only pay off a sorcerer, he can't pay off spirits. But a sorcerer is a spirit guide and a spirit bearer. Therefore, having pleased the sorcerer, he also pleases the spirits. If we say that the order is unfair, then some kind of separate payment may be required, but this is again established through divination. That is, it is asked of the spirit here. Someone looks at the map, someone looks with direct clairvoyance, there are different ways, they throw shells there are many ways. Now, this is such a moment. And one more question too, the white magicians asked me there somehow, trying to tease me that Valentine. But why would the Baron go there to help you himself? Don't you think that he will demand something from you there after his death? I'm going to explain now, yes, in order to remove all these horror stories again, that in fact there is nothing terrible. If we do everything right. What is perfume? Spirits cannot manifest themselves in this world by themselves. It's impossible. Spirits always manifest themselves through people. If the spirit wants to heal someone, then the person goes first to the healer, and the spirit heals through the healer. If the spirit wants to kill someone, the spirit, again, only through a sorcerer who will conduct the ritual, can do it. Spirits cannot act without the will of people, because there is a basic principle of our universe, everyone knows this. The principle of free will. That is, if a person does not express any will to the influence of this spirit, then this does not happen. That's why we need, let's say, magicians as guides, right? That is, the same Baron himself, he can't just take and start changing something. He can only do this with the hands of a sorcerer. Therefore, here it turns out the relationship is like between, I do not know, an electric wire and electricity. That is, what is more important, electrical wiring or electricity. Everything is important, because if we don't have wires, we won't have a light bulb burning, even if there is potential electricity. That's the way it is. Therefore, Mac and people need the spirit to the same extent as they need the spirit. And this turns out to be such a mutually beneficial cooperation. That is, the spirits themselves through people, like electricity or through wires, begins to flow, and a light bulb begins to burn. People's lives begin to change, and a person passes this energy through himself, directs it into the Torah, and in which he also needs. Getting some nice bonuses for himself. That is, we can only exist together. Spirits cannot be completely separate from humans, and humans cannot be completely separate from spirits. That is, it's like, well, there are bacteria, there is an organism. Bacteria live in the body, while helping it digest food, but harm it somewhere. That is, it's the same with spirits.
So, won't it work out, because the spirits will pull out everything they need along this thread? Or is it in principle?
And how can an electric current throw something out of a conductor, for example? It's impossible. Again, there is the principle of free will. In other words, what happens to us, we are our own creators. And again, well, then what is the difference between, for example, voodoo spirits and the same Christian egregor? People also go to church, and also let the Holy Spirit in there, well, relatively speaking, there is Jesus Christ. There is the Trinity, it doesn't matter, into themselves, and read prayers, somehow through this, well. They put candles there for health or for repose. They also call this force into themselves, and so on, and try to influence it through it. We can say that, and how can we be sure that that force will not pull something out of them? Moreover, I think many people already know what a Christian Gregor is, and it's not such a white and fluffy thing. There have been so many religious wars, and in principle. Therefore, here magic is no worse than religion, it's just a form of interaction with a subtle plane. Which, well, let's say religion is discredited, but really it's the same thing, just a little different. In other words, Mark is an intermediary between people and saw me. Yes, just like the priest. Absolutely. And there are those people on whom magic does not work. Can a person defend himself? Well, let's just say it's the same as asking the question. Are there people who, let's say, are not affected by a punch or a knife? If a person is prepared, if he is engaged in boxing, yes, he can dodge. If he is not prepared, he will miss. It's the same in magic. Naturally, there are people who have, let's say, some kind of innate psychic power, innate psychic protection. That is, well, there are just strong people physically, there are weak, there are strong people in spirit, there are weak, yes. That is, of course, if a person is strong, then it is more important to break through him, if a person is weak. It is easier to break through him. But again, from my point of view, justice decides a lot. If you do it fairly, then even a strong person can get hurt. And if you do it unfairly, even a weak person can get away from the impact just spontaneously, without knowing it himself. That is, justice still rules. That's what I want to say in magic, and by the way, there is such a thing in life. And in fact, to say that everyone has their own truth, there is not quite true. In other words, there is always a certain objective justice that can be understood, and both sides of the conflict. If you remove ambitions, remove some false ego, look at it objectively, it is always clear who is right, who is to blame. And who is right about what, and who is to blame for what, you can always figure out. In other words, summarizing, if a person lives fairly, yes, then he has nothing to fear. By and large, yes. That's what it's like to live with God, from my point of view. That this is exactly justice. Because if we tie God to religion, to Christianity or to Islam, it doesn't matter. That is, here is a person who has been consecrated, so he is with God, and a person, for example. If he, I don't know, is engaged in runes, then he is there with the devil. It's nothing. Everything is based on justice. How many people in the church who, let's say, are dishonest? Dishonest, yes, and how many people in magic who can be decent? Everything is determined by our actions. God, he is in justice, in a pure heart. If a person has it inside, no matter what he does, voodoo, or orthodoxy, or Buddhism, he will be pure. And if he is selfish, if he experiences evil, tries to commit some unfair acts, even though he will again be religious, a believer. There are such cases. Well, let's take the same religious terrorism that we are now facing all over the world, yes. That is, they are religious people, probably, but we understand that it is, to put it mildly, not good what they are doing. Blowing up the subway and killing people. That's it. I think your colleagues said that, as a rule, people themselves summon some invisible creatures called settlers, yes. Somehow they pulled themselves up to some kind of a negative entity, and then suffer from it. Yes, this is again, going back to our previous conversation, this most often happens in alcoholics and drug addicts. That is, when a person is in a state of narcotic, alcoholic intoxication, naturally his natural defenses of the body weaken. Consciousness becomes on the one hand more mobile, but also weaker at the same time. And of course, such a person can easily get hooked. Well, the same thing is even the fact of alcoholism and drug addiction, it is possible. Many regard it as an obsession. I also associate this with psychological problems, because, let's say, I work with alcoholics, to be honest, using hypnosis. I used to work with them on ritual magic, the results were worse. The best results are to work with alcoholics through hypnosis. But in any case, if we are talking about negative entities, then of course, it is alcoholism of drug addiction. This is the most basic thing there is. Naturally, as a practitioner, I can tell you, let's say I don't drink, I don't smoke. But there may be 2 glasses of dry wine there for the new year, yes, this is the maximum. That is, alcohol and drugs, and in principle nicotine, is the thing that greatly weakens the sorcerer. Well, that's why in Africa, for example, and in Haiti, they sometimes drink during the ritual. But this is not so much, and this is exactly the ritual intake of alcohol. And in ordinary life, no one drinks with normal practice, because it deprives them of strength in all seriousness.
Is it possible to protect yourself, or get rid of the settlers?
Naturally. The main form of protection, I have always said this, by the way, applies to both sorcerers and ordinary people. This is a healthy lifestyle. That is, when we have a pure consciousness, not clouded by various means, drugs, alcohol, then naturally we have a natural defense. Here. And then it's not bad, of course, it's all the same for any person to practice something. Because, well, how does it count? That supposedly in order to practice magic you need some inclinations, it's better for an ordinary person not to touch it. But this is not entirely true. For example, any person should engage in a certain amount of sports, do morning exercises, sometimes go there as a child to karate, in order to be able to protect themselves. This is normal. In other words, a person can be a lawyer, a scientist, but he needs a healthy body and the necessary minimal skills. Even in the same boxing, it's better for him to at least be able to defend himself on the street, you never know what. It's the same with magic. There is no need to become serious sorcerers, play a wedding with spirits, get a lot of obligations and so on. But to have some basic skill, like in sports at the level of morning exercises. Also in magic at the level of the simplest methods of work in order to protect yourself and harmonize, I think it is necessary. It's like literacy, we all know a foreign language there, at least one. But this is a necessary literacy, yes. It's the same with magic, that is, some necessary minimum step. It is desirable to understand at least the techniques of self-hypnosis in order to be able to fall asleep easily. For example, I used to sleep poorly before studying hypnosis. Well, somehow I didn't really have a pine tree. I studied hypnosis, now I sleep like a dead man. In other words, I think many people in a modern city, in a megalopolis, have problems sleeping. That is, at least to study hypnosis, at the level of self-hypnosis, so that you can fall asleep deeply and easily. Why not? Only for the benefit. But the same goes for working with spirits, that is, there are basic techniques, why not, it's only good. I also read that you do not share that there is black magic there, white magic, that's all. Yes, absolutely. I don't even separate magic and religion. That is, different methods, but in fact not even very different. In religion, prayers are recited, in voodoo prayers are recited. There in religion, they go to the voodoo church with Baron Sambode, we go to the cemetery. Well, that is, there is also a place before conversion, a church, or a cemetery, or the ocean. There is a way of conversion, some prayers in their language, there is a form of offering candles. They put candles in the church, we light candles in the cemetery. So it's all like that. What does the spirit need from people at the moment when they get hooked on this person? In general, what is their goal? Their goal, in fact, if we are talking really, is to help a person. If a person is possessed by an uncontrollable spirit, as in the case of drug addicts and alcoholics, this indicates that they are living incorrectly. In order to expel this spirit, they need to stop being drug addicts, stop being alcoholics, and take their lives into their own hands. Therefore, when the spirit moves in, it naturally begins to eat a person, and begins to harm him. But in fact, he acts in a philosophical sense as his friend, because he forces him to change his lifestyle. And either he will bring him to a mental hospital, to madness, to suicide, even many famous actors and singers there who were drug addicts, they committed suicide, yes. That is, there the evil spirit drove him to suicide. But others, more adequate, managed to overcome the addiction. After that the spirit came out of them. And they lived an even, excellent life. And if the spirit had not possessed them, would not have begun to torment them, then, accordingly, they would never have abandoned the pernicious passion, and so would have fucked themselves up. That's it. That is, they, the spirits, play when the spirits torment us, they actually help us just in such an evil way. Therefore, the spirits, punishing us, force us to change our behavior. And if we become flawless, as Carlos Castaneda and The Perfection of a Warrior wrote, we give up bad habits, start playing sports, start practicing magic, start living right, we have no one to be afraid of in this case.
Do you ever have such a thing that the opinion of the spirits differ, and can you act against the will of the spirits?
Well, there were cases when the spirits checked me, and a priori said not quite adequate things in order to check. I reacted to it correctly. I didn't do these things, but later the spirits said that you did the right thing, and we will help you even more. In many ways, the spirits, they still perceive this world through a sorcerer. That is, as I have already said, what sorcerers and people in general are for spirits. So that spirits can perceive the world through them. And when a spirit enters a person, it begins to adopt certain characteristics of this person to some extent. That is, if, let's say, we have Baron Samedi, then it's just one spirit, Baron Samedi. But if we talk to different priests of the Baron, we will see, as it were, completely different people. And a completely different approach. That is, the same spirit manifests differently through different people, depending on their properties. As well as electricity, we can insert it into a thick wire there, I don't know, copper. Or into a thin wire that is already damaged there. Yes, it will have a completely different effect. That's why in many ways, not in all, but in many ways, the spirit perceives reality through a sorcerer. And what the sorcerer likes, the spirit often likes. Not always, but often it is.
In other words, it turns out that this is the spirit of Baron Samedi. He manifests himself in different ways in different sorcerers. Well, that is, for example, there is you, Valentin. Yes, there is there I don't know any Carlos from Spain, who works there too. Yes, there. Well, I'm just talking abstractly like that now. And this spirit will manifest itself in different ways.
In different ways up to certain limits. That is, there are certain features that are characteristic of the self-defense in principle. But the nuances can change, of course. And what happens at all during the ritual? Do you feel some kind of filling, or on the contrary, extinguishing there, and is it an energy-consuming process? Well, look, if we are talking about voodoo, but by the way, if we are talking about any serious witchcraft at all, then the ritual. It occurs through the concept of possession. That is, ideally, how should it be? The person conducting the ritual must enter into a trance, the spirit enters it, and the person is already in such a state, as if half-fainting. That is, he has a part of his consciousness, but a part of his consciousness replaces the spirit. And a person, being in a trance, begins to perform certain actions. And, for example, it's also not bad if the work goes according to the client, and the client is also immersed in a trance. Because when? Well, if we work, for example, to remove the damage or expel some kind of settler, that is, when a person enters, for example, Baron Samedi, he thereby displaces everything extraneous from the body. And from the human energy, right? That is, here we have, for example, some kind of rotten pipe. Yes, if you let a strong pressure of water, it will sort of clean it. Yes, rust will fly there. That's the same thing that happens to a person. He has some blocks in his body, some kind of spoilage, a negative. When a big force, like Baron Samedi, the male aspect of death enters it, then all this tinsel that interferes with it, it just flies apart. A person thus receives purification. That is why trance states, namely those associated with the installation of the spirit into oneself during the ritual, are the basic thing in Udu. By the way, Siberian shamans also fall into obsession. In general, such techniques are characteristic of witchcraft. How do you feel? This is an energy-consuming process, it's like a continuation, and here you have just said in the course of a person that their conference. That is, it means that when you conduct a ritual, it really lies, or else, as it were. This product can enter the client when due to rid the patient. Ideally, it should be. If you even watch videos from some African rituals, you can see that some of the participants of the ritual begin to fall there. Somehow enter into a trance, it is unclear, to go too high, yes, this is normal. That is ideally, not only the sorcerer himself to plunge into trance, but also to immerse the client directly. And then it's better, well, the probability of triggering is greater, it really is. But it is absolutely safe, because I have been infusing spirits into myself constantly, and during all rituals, and have entered into trances. You see, I am alive and well, an adequate person, not crazy, and although I have been doing this directly for more than 10 years. But magicians in general, I have been interested since the 9th grade. So after the ritual, do you have a normal natural state? Well, let's just say that after the ritual, I usually go to bed right away. I go to bed, but naturally in the state of ritual, I feel in an altered state of consciousness. After the ritual, I gradually return to my normal state of life and go to bed. In the morning I wake up already in a state, usually completely. Is that clear? Clearly. And in general, there have been cases in your practice of getting rid of a drug addiction that are just specific. So that you work with this problem. Let's just say it's not a very frequent request, but there were. Moreover, I worked with alcoholism, I worked with drug addiction, but I also worked directly when a person had voices in his head. And when a person, what you said, had night demons, succubi, incubi. Someone was constantly strangling him, scaring him, and so on. By the way, I use not only magic, but also hypnosis, in some cases even more hypnosis, but again, if it gives an effect. Why not? I just do everything at once. I do both magic and hypnosis, and it works better because of that. And people came to you with a survey, yes, no matter with what, yes, you helped them, they got the result. But let's just say that the way it was obtained, or rather the circumstances that resulted in the desired results, did not suit them. But that's exactly what I didn't have. I had a feeling that sometimes the client did not get what he asked for, but in the end, he was satisfied. I had a case when a woman wanted to return one man. I looked, well, the man clearly does not suit her, but she says, no. I only need him, that's all. Well, I need him, let's work. They started working, and after a while, she started dating his friend. That is, well, let's just say, the woman was older than her chosen one by many years, and he had a friend. And he didn't have a relationship with him, but this friend who came to her, he turned out to be even more adequate. And she told me later, Valia says, you know, I analyzed who I wouldn't be able to live with anyway, even if he returned. Because he is inadequate, let's face it. But this friend of his, he's with me now, and I'm very happy, that is, very good that it happened. And it so happened that even directly when I performed the ritual, after the ritual, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. I usually work at midnight according to all the rules of working with the cemetery. After the ritual, she turned on the phone. This friend of his, her ex-boyfriend, called her, and came to me, took her by car. And since then, they immediately began a relationship. Well, here's a straight magical case. Yes, that is, she paid money for the return of his friend, but in the end she was satisfied, and it was voiced to me. The words, Valia, he's even better, I'm happy. Also younger than her, and they are the same age as that friend, that's how it happened.
The theme of the board. Is it enough to pay only with money? After all, if it arrived somewhere, it means it has gone somewhere. In other words, what kind of energy exchange is this? That is, if one energy passes to a person as a returned husband, for example, somewhere there should be.
I understand you. But I have already partially answered the question, that spirits are interested in people, that they cannot manifest themselves. And the more I give them work, the more I make returns, purges, it doesn't matter, attracting good luck. Moreover, these spirits become manifested in real life through me. In other words, this is already their interest. In other words, they remain due to the fact that they manifest themselves through my work. It is beneficial to them, because they seem to be seizing territories more, becoming more manifest here. Here. And as for what a person pays with, a person actually pays with money, because money is energy, the energy of the material world. And a person pays money to a sorcerer. This is to talk about whether there are free magicians there, but I was told there by all sorts of women. But I heard that there was a grandmother in the village there who did everything for free. But as a voodooist, yes, and as a hypnotherapist, by the way, I can say that voodoo in Haiti, in Africa, and in Russia, as I am already its representative here, is always a financial payment. That is, magic, money is paid for magic. The money is paid a lot, because serious work requires serious provisions. And the same money is a form of settlement with a sorcerer. And since the sorcerer is a guide of spirits, this is also a form of calculations with spirits. An additional form of calculation with spirits is the work itself, through which spirits influence people and become more manifest in our world. That's it.
They just talked a lot about spirits, talked about the defense of the stay spirits. What I'm interested in is there any hierarchy in the spirit world? Is there any master spirit, intermediaries, inferior in the voodoo tradition, in religion?
In the voodoo tradition, it is believed that there is a supreme God who is one. That is, in Udu, it is essentially monotheism. Here. But again, in the voodoo religion, it is believed that when God created the earth, he saw what he created, what kind of people. How many dishonest people, what bad deeds they do. And he, having created this world, turned away from it. That is, he did not like his creation, and he does not seem to look at what is happening. For the reason that it is unpleasant for him to look, and it is useless to turn to this God to some extent, because he does not look at this world, he does not like it. Here. And it makes sense to turn here to the Wuddans, well, or the Kloa, which we say in Haiti, who are directly present on this earth. They are his children, in fact, like people, and communication takes place with them. In other words, voodooists recognize the one God, but they do not turn to him, for the reason that it is ineffective from their point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
What was told? Thank you. Hello? Shadow control is on the air. Every single person in his life repeatedly encounters magic and what is inexplicable. And when faced with this, he often forgets, although the consequence remains. And the question is, what is magic? False or true? Magic exists, and it is real. If magic was a fantasy or a deception, it wouldn't have existed for so many thousands of years. And throughout all this time, it has seduced and seduces the masses of people to this day. Magic is the oldest and most numerous religion, the religion of Satan, whose adherents are even atheists. That is why all the prophets at all times said about the inadmissibility of practicing magic, that magic does not lead to hell. And yet, some religions, originally built on the true teachings introduced by the prophets, today openly engage in magic, conduct various magical rituals, offerings, sacrifices. But after all, the prophets did not do this, and moreover, they bequeathed not to do it, All these actions are imposed by the devil. As well as begging, supposedly God has material goods, health. But the prophets said, it is not worth asking God for anything, except for the salvation of the soul. It turns out that those who had to fight and resist magic openly serve Satan. Why is she so attractive? When people, knowing about the ruinousness, and yet, exchange the eternal for the momentary, ghostly, material. Yes, the invisible world exists, and it is diverse, like the ocean is full of unknown life. And together with you, friends, we would like to understand a little bit about what magic really is, why it is so tempting, and how the invisible world really works.